Hey friends, welcome to Flight Test Tech. I'm Josh. Today we're going to be showing how to build the brand new FT Easy Raptor. Now if you guys are familiar with our FT Easy line, it's basically a fantastic way to get in the hobby and learn how to build and how to fly. Today we're going to be showing how to build the FT Easy Raptor, and this build's incredibly quick. And you're also going to notice it's our first easy plane with an actual full form body. This FT Easy Raptor can be built in as little as 15 minutes. So let's go and get our materials in order and we'll get started. All right, so the first thing we want to do with our FT Easy Raptor is we're going to go ahead and pop out all the pieces, and then we're going to go ahead and identify them. One thing that's pretty cool is you're going to notice here we have a new style prop that's actually polycarbonate, much more powerful, and also much more quiet. This plane is specifically designed around it, and you can probably tell because it's much bigger. We're also using Adam's Ready board versus our Maker foam. The reason is we can design bigger, easy airplanes that are going to fly really good. They're going to be incredibly light. The only thing is you don't want to spray paint them. Use decals or markers instead. So let's go ahead and pop out all of our pieces here, and we'll talk more about the build construction once we identify the parts. Whenever we're popping out the pieces, we've tabbed this in a way where all we basically need to do is just kind of wiggle and rock, and the pieces will pop right out. Feel free to pause the video and make sure that all your pieces look just like what you see here. First, we're going to have our main body here. This is going to be our wing section. We're going to have our left and right nose doublers. We're going to have the front part of our fuselage and nose right here. We're also going to have the lower body, our tail assembly, and our front battery hatch. And this little guy right here is simply our dihedral gauge and also our gauge for the reflex that we're going to need in the back of our tail. We're also going to include a little decal kit for our canopies, and for a limited time until they get included in the Easy Power Packs, we're going to have this new set of high power, high efficiency polycarbonate props. Let's put our attention first towards our main body, and we're also going to need our little dihedral gauge too. We can put everything else aside. So for this build, we are going to need dihedral in it. Dihedral gives us a natural ability to help it stabilize. What you're going to notice with dihedral is the wings are going to be curved up ever so slightly. This means when the plane banks, the lower wing is going to generate more lift than the wing that's higher, and that's going to help the plane self-level itself. It's also going to give it the ability to have a nice coordinated turn when you're flying it through the air. To get our dihedral gauge, all we simply need to do is fold this over 180 degrees, put a little drop of glue, and press it down. Make sure you save this piece for later on in the build because we're going to use this exact same piece for the gauge for our elevators. Now the center section of our body you can see has a nice crease down the seam here. All we're going to simply need to do, to get our dihedral is we're going to let it go ahead and slightly curl up ever so slightly. We want to make sure that we can slide our dihedral gauge in right to the flesh part of the wingtip and not have a lot of pressure pointing down. I always like to keep a scrap piece of foam handy, so that way when I open this up and I put a bead of glue, starting and stopping about 1/4 inch from the edge, I can smear off any excess that we may have. We don't want to add too much extra weight to this airplane, and smearing this glue actually gives it a really nice strong glue joint. There we go. We're going to give this about 45 seconds to fully dry, and then we can move on to our next step. After about 45 seconds, you're going to notice that when you remove pressure here, everything stays put. You should also be able to remove your dihedral gauge and not have the wing fall down. Let's go ahead and put our main body to the side here, and we're going to put our attention towards the nose now. Now would be a really good time to go ahead and take our little decals and stick them on both sides of our canopy. You're going to notice on one side of our canopy, it's already marked out, just like what you see here. All we need to do, it's a lot easier to do this step now as compared to later in case your doubler is kind of shifted up a little bit. This way it's going to be right where it needs to be. So lay that right over the edge line. Now that we have our canopy decal in place, we're first going to slide over the doubler that has the notch cut out of it. You're going to notice that when we put these doublers next to each other, one doubler doesn't have an extension on the lower part of the body. That's going to line up exactly with these little etch marks that you see here. We always like to do a test fit first to make sure everything lines up. And then once we're happy with that, we can flip that over 180 degrees. And we're just going to put a nice little perimeter of glue down. More glue doesn't mean more strength, and I always like to keep it about 1/8 inch from the edge. There we go. Now we're going to go right back to our build table. We're going to place it right over those etch lines. I'm just going to make sure the outer perimeter is nice and flush, and then also the piece lines up perfectly with the etch marks that we have. Once you're happy with the way everything fits, you can press it down and let it dry. Let's do the exact same process now on the other side. Again, we always do a test fit first to make sure that we're happy with where everything is. And we always put our glue on the smaller piece. That looks really good. Again, we're going to fold it over 180 degrees. Thin ribbon of glue is all we need. And we're just going to line it up. Again, it's nice and flush to the bottom surfaces. You can see that battery slot right in the middle. It's all lined up, and we have that center cavity for the center of our body to go through. Now would be a really good time to slide this into our body. The first time we're going to do this here, it may be a little bit rigid, so what I like to do is just start it very gently, and you're going to see that these two cavities are just going to kind of slide right in place. What I like to do then is use the table as my friend and press this down all the way until it goes and meets the very front of the nose against the table. Just like that. Now, this has enough friction fit to be able to go in without any glue whatsoever, but I like to kind of lock this in with a couple little drops just right where the body meets. Just a couple on each side. And we can even come back with a little scrap piece of foam and wipe it in. This whole plane can technically friction fit together and fly without any glue whatsoever, but I would recommend tacking it down in place just so if you have a crash, things don't get knocked loose. Now comes the fun part. This is the first time we've ever had an easy plane actually have a full fuselage. And the FT Easy Raptor is a perfect example because you get to see all the great classic details that you saw on the plane it's inspired by, which is the F-22 Raptor. To prepare this, I'm going to go ahead and go right over these score lines here with the back part of my marker. If you're used to using a razor blade, you could cut a double bevel, but it really does not need to have that full double bevel cut because it's actually on the inside. I'm going to go ahead and just do a couple swipes down, and you're going to notice it's going to fold very nicely, just like this. Now this process is a fun process here. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of fold these two edges in so they can easily meet with these widened slots for the tail. And take your time with this here, because what we're going to do as we push it into place, we're going to let the tail slowly open up. There we go. And we're just going to kind of pull them through on each side. Here's one side. Here's the other. All the way until it meets down at the very bottom. Here's that side. Just keep pulling that fin in. And then finally, it should meet up with the notches at the very top. Now when we sight down this, what we should see is that the bottom surface of this crease meets up firmly against the body. And also, when we hold up and look at the airplane, we should see that the center of the body is centered up to the nose and that the tails both have roughly the same angle. If it slid too far to one side or the other, you're going to notice that one tail is going to be up more vertical and the other tail is going to be laying really flat. Just make sure that everything is nice and proportional and even on both sides. We're going to hold off putting a small bead of glue down on this until we get everything situated because we're going to actually use this to guide the wires underneath and through, and that will give us the ability to give it a really clean build. The last piece that we're going to go ahead and form and install in place, but we're not going to glue, is going to be our little hatch that covers both our battery lead and also our flight control board. Now this piece doesn't have to come off and on every time that we want to go ahead and fly again. This actually can be done by just connecting and disconnecting the battery, which is outside of this hatch. But if you want to be able to turn off and on your model or you want to add optional lights in the future, you can go ahead and simply remove this hatch, go ahead and get access to your flight control board, and then put it back on. This is also really handy if you want to be able to bounce your flight control board from plane to plane. Same process as before. We're just going to take the edge of our marker. I like just to do 2 or 3 swipes right down the crease. And we want to make sure that we can kind of open this up without any major resistance. You're going to notice that we have a slot, a tab, and a slot. And all this will do is simply form right down in here and press into place. Now that we've pressed everything into place, let's go ahead and remove this. We're going to put a small dab of glue starting and stopping just about a 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch from the edge. We're going to put it right back down one more time and let it fully dry. This will give us the battery hatch form without us having to constantly form it and put it on every time. So I'm going to go ahead and just put a bead of glue here and a bead of glue here. You can see when I crush that together, it kind of puddles up. That's wonderful. And we're going to set it into place. We're going to hold it centered to the rest of the body and give it about 45 seconds to dry. Let's go ahead and put this aside right now. And while that's finishing its drying, we can go ahead and open up our FT Easy Pack. So now that our main body is done, we're going to put our attention towards the electronics here. The three main electronics that are going to go inside the airplane are going to be our two motors. You're going to notice that one's labeled left, one's labeled right, and also our flight control board. We're also going to give you in the kit a little zip tie. So if you don't want to glue your control board in place, maybe you're going to be swapping it around, or you're in a school environment where at the end of the day, these components will come off. You can always use this little zip tie, and we'll show you how to do that. We're also going to take the props that are included, and we're going to go ahead and install those now. It's a little bit easier to do it now versus later, but if you get them backwards, don't worry. You can always replace these props in case they break, or if you get them backwards when the plane's actually having the motors installed. You're going to notice on these that you have a B2 and also an A3. The B2 is going to go on the red motor, and the A3 is going to go on the right motor. And we're going to want to make sure that this little nub that's kind of sticking up the highest is pointing away from the motor. We always want to have our props facing in the direction of flight, and in this case, the nub is always pointing towards the tail. So for that process, all we simply need to do is I'm just going to hold this right down against the table, and we're going to slide it in place, just like that. Make sure when you press your props into place that you're not pushing them so hard that it's bottoming out against the motor, and also take care not to push it so hard where you bend the shaft. Now we're going to take the one that's labeled A3. Again, because this is a pusher version, our little nub's going to be pointing towards the tail. And there we go. Anytime that you need to replace your prop, it's very easy to do it. We even have a simple prop removal tool, but it just pops right off and friction fits right back on. Now to install our motors, we're going to place these on the left and right side to make sure that we have the right ones. So in other words, if I'm flying in the airplane right now and I'm in the cockpit, here's my left wing, here's my left motor, here's my right wing, and here's my right motor. Make sure that when we flip this over that you keep the motors oriented with the proper one. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this over. So when I flip this over, I'll grab both the wing and the motor that I'm going to install it on and flip it over. And to do our quick little test fit here, we're just going to fit the little flats here. We're going to push it all the way against the edge. Make sure that you're not having it up at an angle like this, but nice and flat against the wing. Once you've done your test fit, all we need is a drop of glue on both sides, and we'll press it down into place. Again, we're making sure this is flat up against the wing. We don't want this to be lifted up at an angle, or the plane's going to turn whenever you give it power. Let's go ahead and do the other side of the wing here. Again, we always do our little test fit. There we go, right in the middle. Little drop on both sides. And we'll press it in place. Now to make this nice and dressed up, I can lift up my fuselage just a little bit. I'm going to slide our little battery leads right underneath that crack and then pull them through. There's one, and here's two. At this point, I like to go ahead and press this down into place, pull these kind of taut, and I'm just going to put a small little drop of glue on both creases. There we go. And I'm going to hold this in place until it's fully dry. Our next step is to mount the flight control board. Our flight control board is going to mount on the side of our nose here, right where that cutout is. If you want to use your zip tie, all you simply need to do is just pass your zip tie right through. We're going to poke it through that foam on the other side. Make sure that your lead is pointing towards your nose. Through the other side, we'll wrap it around and then pull it tight. Again, if you're just planning on flying this and you don't want to remove it immediately after maybe a class session or a workshop, you can simply use 2 drops of glue and glue it into place. Let's make sure it's nice and tight. Then we can take a pair of scissors, cut off the excess. To make our connections here, you're going to notice that our pins are slightly off center, so they can only go in one way. The red connector is going to line up with the red connector. The white connector is going to line up with the white connector. When you press this in, make sure that you don't have to force it too hard. I always like to see where the pins are arranged on the connector, where they're arranged here, and it should just simply press in very easily. If you find yourself forcing it, most likely you got to rotate the connector 180 degrees. Same process on the white one now. I'm just going to go ahead and find where it meets up real easily. and pop it into place. If you have optional LEDs, now would be a really good time to make those connections and route them wherever you want. Just keep in mind that little bit of extra weight, you're going to want to make sure you adjust your battery for proper center of gravity. Now that we have our motors and our flight control board all connected, let's make sure that our gyros and our transmitter are all working properly. Then we're ready for our batteries. We got to do a little bit of reflex on the tail and we can go fly. Let's go ahead and install 3 AA batteries into our easy transmitter here. You're going to notice that the spring side goes towards the negative battery terminal and the positive goes towards the tab. And it looks like my battery is pretty much charged, so I can go ahead and plug that. And I'm just going to go ahead and make my connection first. Make sure when you plug in your battery that the positive and negatives line up. And we're going to go ahead and use our switch and turn it on. You're going to notice a rapid flashing red light. Once I have that rapid flashing red light on the airplane, I can go ahead and make sure my throttle is all the way down, press the button 1 time. Once we do that, you're going to notice that a rapid flashing red light is now slowed down a little bit, but it's still not bound. To bind it, we go full throttle and then close throttle. At this point, we should have a solid red light and a solid red light on our transmitter. Now to test this out, I'm going to go ahead and hold this up and I'm going to give it a little bit of throttle. The first thing that we should notice is that we're not feeling any air towards the nose of the airplane. That means the props are running in the right direction. Also, as we give it throttle and we rotate it, we should feel resistance on the wing that's retreating back and less resistance on the wing that's facing forward. This is the plane trying to bring itself back to level, straight flight. And then our last test here is we're going to give a little bit of throttle and we're going to push the stick to the left and right. When we push it to the left and right, we should feel the left or right motor winding up a little higher. And that's exactly what it does. At this point, all of our electronics are working properly. I'm going to go ahead and leave my switch turned on, and that way I can put my battery hatch on and the plane will turn on whenever I connect my battery. And I like to just basically take a piece of tape right over my hatch and lock it down. Again, you can pop this out as a friction fit, but if you leave your terminal turned on, whenever you plug in your battery, the plane's going to power on for you. Now this plane looks like it may fly, but there's 2 crucial things that we got to do before we take it out for its first flight. Number 1 is we got to put the proper amount of reflex in the back of our tail. This is going to give us the proper angle of attack to help the airplane fly through the air. If you don't have any reflex, what you're going to notice is as you throw the airplane, it's immediately going to nosedive and it's not going to have the proper flight characteristics. Now most airplanes use a couple different forms of lift. One is dynamic lift, which is where basically it works off of Newton's law. You have an angle of attack like you see here, and as the airflow comes and hits it, it helps propel the airplane up. The other form of lift is aerodynamic lift, and that's typically where you'll see an airfoil and that causes a low pressure above it, and that's also referred to as Bernoulli's principle. This plane obviously doesn't have an airfoil, so we need to have the tails help us establish the proper angle of attack to help it fly well. To get the proper angle here, we're going to use this little tab that we have and we're going to flip our gauge upside down. We're going to line this up with the hinge line, and what we want to see is we want to go ahead and tape it in a place where this comes up to meet it, just like that. I always like to use tape instead of glue for this because everyone's airplane is going to be a little bit different and your flying styles are going to be a little different. So all we need to do is kind of take it right where it needs to be and place a piece of tape right down. The most important thing is you want to make sure that both of your elevons are equally spaced upwards. There we go. Whenever you change this, you're going to want to make sure that you change both of them or else your plane's going to turn for you. Now I'm just going ahead and matching the other one, lifting up, there we go, and pressing it down. Now that we have the deflection proper, let's go ahead and slide our battery into the battery slot. And depending on the flying style that you like, we're either going to slide this forward or we're going to slide this backwards. I'm going to go ahead and press this on through. And now you can see a little bit nose heavy. And we'll slide this on backwards. And there we go. This is a really great starting point for your very first flights, but if you shift the battery backwards even more, making it a little bit more tail heavy, you're going to have more of a high alpha or a high angle of attack, a slower flight experience, a little bit more maneuverable. If you slide it forward, you're going to have more speed, but keep in mind with more speed, you're going to have to add throttle on your turns. But we get to show you that in the air, and that's exactly what we're going to do next. All right, friends, we are ready to fly. We are blessed with a beautiful day. It is dead calm. Anytime that you're flying for the first time, don't pick a windy day to do it. But if you do have a little bit of wind, always make sure you launch directly into the wind, especially whether it's an easy or a full-blown RC or even a full-scale aircraft. As you remember before, we already have this bound. We're ready to fly it, but we do want a higher level of throw. And for that reason, we're going to go ahead and press our right button here, and we're going to get a flashing red light. This is going to give us high rates. High rates are really important whenever we're flying this, unless you have a huge open area, because it turns very, very soft whenever you're in low rates. So make sure you have that flashing red light before you fly for the first time. I simply like to go to basically full throttle at first, and I'm going to do an underhand toss right directly into the wind. Let's go and put it up in the air and see how it flies. And there it is. This is one of the reasons why we wanted to go with that Adams Ready board. It gives us the ability to have a lot more performance. And right now, I'm actually maintaining altitude just around half throttle. Now, depending on where your center of gravity is and your flying style, you may have to add a little bit of power on your turns, but you can do really cool maneuvers like swooping maneuvers coming down. Anytime you want to descend, go below half throttle. Anytime you want to climb, you go above half throttle. And then I just like to add a little bit of throttle right in my turns to sharpen them up and maintain altitude. Look at that. This has quickly become one of my favorite airplanes to fly, and it even handles the wind very well. And let's go ahead and give it full throttle here. You can almost do a loop. Yes, there it is! And again, anytime you go back to center stick at half throttle, it's going to be nice and level for you. All right, let's line this up for a landing. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and catch it. All right, friends, I want to thank you sincerely for being part of Flite Test family. Thank you for taking the time to build along with me. And a huge shout out to our friends at the EAA. They were the inspiration with their Girls on the Fly program that we wanted to design this and bring it into reality. So that means that there's lots of different kids all over the country that are going to be building this aircraft in their schools, in their classrooms, in their clubs, in their programs like Girls on the Fly. And if you guys are new to the hobby and you want a really awesome jet that you can build and fly, check out the FT Easy Raptor. It's available in our stores. We'll see you next time.